It's often said that we are our memories, that web of experiences, relationships, thoughts, and feelings that make us who we are. We don't remember it all, of course. That would be impossible. Or would it? There's been a discovery in the field of memory recently, so new you won't find it in any textbook, so hard to fathom, there are some who remain unconvinced. For the moment, the scientists studying it are simply calling it Superior Autobiographical Memory. And unless you happen to know one of the handful of people discovered so far who have it, get ready to be amazed. Louise Owen is 37 years old and a professional violinist living in New York City. But she has another gift too, one that is far more rare. Let me give you a date. Let's say January 2nd, 1990.
Right now I'm remembering the jogging class that I started that morning.
And you're actually back there.
I can feel it. I can remember the coach saying, keep going.
That was more than 20 years ago when she was 16, a date I picked completely at random, as I did this one. February 18th, 1988.
1988. Oh.
You're laughing.
I'm laughing. It was a Thursday. I had a big conversation with a friend of mine, and that's all I'm going to say.
Louise says she can remember every day of her life since the age of 11. Try to talk us through, can you do that? How it works out of the air. April 21st, 1991.
1991, okay, April 21st. So in the moment between April 21st and 1991, I have scrolled through 25 April 21sts thinking, which one is it going to be? Which one is it going to be? Okay, 1991, which was a Sunday, and I was in Los Angeles, and I had a concert with the American Youth Symphony.
You went to the most important thing
right,
that happened that day.
That was the most, I mean, I probably don't want to hear about, sort of the day. Oh, I got up in the morning, and I got dressed.
You remember that?
Yeah.
You remember what you had for lunch?
Not what I had for lunch that day, but I do remember what I had for dinner the night before.
And effortless. It just pops in.
I mean, for me, it's almost as automatic as if you say, what is your name and where do you live?
But how do we know that what she says she remembers really happened? Enter James McGaugh, a professor of neurobiology at the University of California, Irvine, and a renowned expert on memory. Dr. McGaugh is the first to discover and study superior autobiographical memory, and he is quizzing Louise, his fifth subject, to find out. An eye condition requires him to wear a clouded lens.
Let's move back in time now to 1990. It rained on several days in January and February. Can you name the dates on which it rained?
Believe it or not, she could.
Let's see. It was slightly rainy and cloudy on January 14th, 15th. It was very hot the weekend of the 27th, 28th. No rain.
We checked the official weather records.
It rained very hard on Sunday, February 4th.
And she was right. McGaugh says this type of memory is completely new to science, so he and his colleagues have had to devise their own tests, like this one on public events.
October 19th, 1987.
It was a Monday. That was the day of the big stock market crash, and the cellist Jacqueline Dupre died that day.
The Berlin Wall falls on what day?
November 9th, 1989, which was a Thursday.
Christopher Reeve's accident occurred on what day?
It was Saturday, May 27th, 1995.
And when were the Oscars held in 1999?
In 1999, Sunday, March 21st.
Yes, perfect.
I went to a fabulous Oscar party that day.
Because these people remember things that you and I couldn't possibly remember.
And they're not memorizing, there's no trick.
They can do with their memories what you and I can do about yesterday.
And they can do it every day.
And they can do it every day. And when I ask what goes on in your brain, what goes on in your mind, they give the very unsatisfying response, I just see it. It's just there.
The first person ever identified with this ability is Jill Price, who says she feels haunted by the never-ending stream of memories and hasn't wanted to meet any of the others.
40 tomorrow with a chance of snow or rain.
Next was Brad Williams, a radio news anchor and reporter from La Crosse, Wisconsin, who isn't bothered by his memory. He says it comes in handy at work and playing trivia games.
I would get 6,000, 7,000 points. Everybody else would get 1,000 points.
Third was Rick Barron from Cleveland. Do you remember every movie you've ever seen?
Sure.
And you remember when lots of television shows started?
Anything, movie.
60 Minutes?
Tuesday, September 24th, 68. The first Sunday show was September 19th, 71.
August 1st, 1974.
Thursday.
Why do you know that?
Well, that's my most memorable August 1st.
And Bob Petrella,
I moved to LA that year.
a TV producer and writer who serves as the collective memory and sometimes the evening entertainment for his friends.
1996, April 27th, which was a Saturday.
It was a Tuesday.
No, April 27th, 96.
Chart? No, oh, I'm in 93.
See?
It was a Saturday.
Everybody
You're right.
else can't remember anything as getting older.
I have an almanac and I'm wrong.
Not wrong.
I must confess that when I first heard about this research, what surprised me was not that this condition existed, but that it was considered so rare. That's because it sounded like a description of a friend of mine, the actress Mary Lou Henner, the star of the hit TV show Taxi. She lives with her husband and 2 sons from a prior marriage in Los Angeles.
Hey, Mom, what day was Valentine's Day in 79?
In 1979, it was a Wednesday.
And you're right.
You know, you've lived with me your entire
Yeah, but
life.
you've never explained how you do that.
I don't do it. I just see it.
You and I have known each other
25 years. I can rattle off almost every single time I've seen you. Do you remember when we went to Oriole, the restaurant? That was 93.
Oh my gosh.
That was
Oh
June
my-
1st, the Tuesday.
And what did we eat?
I had the salmon because
She even remembers what day she first wore many of the shoes in her large and well-organized closet.
Like these shoes, I wore them the first time I wore them October 18th, 2007. These I wore on April the 21st of this year, so that was a Tuesday. These shoes I got a long time ago.
It sure seemed like superior autobiographical memory to me.
1982. I got them on April the 9th, so that was a Friday of 1982.
We put Mary Lou in touch with Dr. McGaw
Hi, so nice to meet you.
I'm Jim.
to have her memory officially put to the test. There was a session in his office.
You know when John Lennon was killed?
Yes, that was December 8th, 1980, and that was a Monday.
A round of standard memory tests,
Go ahead and put them in the order that they were presented to you.
the public events quiz,
Delta Airline Flight 191 crashes near Dallas, Texas.
Oh, I know exactly when that happened because all of a sudden I was at it was August the 2nd of 1985. It was a Friday.
After 7 hours of grilling,
October 1st, 8th, 15th, 22nd.
McGaw and his collaborator, neuroscientist Larry Cahill, officially anointed Mary Lou Henner Superior Autobiographical Memory Subject number 6.
Extremely impressive.
You really do remember your whole life.
It's like putting in a DVD and it cues up to a certain place. I'm there again. So I'm looking out from my eyes and seeing things visually as I would have that day.
Do you remember all your old boyfriend's birthdays? I'll bet you do.
Not only that, the date of the first time, it's like, no, I remember in order.
Let's have another warm Miami welcome for Mary Lou Henner.
We searched for footage of long-ago events in Mary Lou's life to try and stump her. October 26th, 1976.
Okay, October 26th,
1976
was a Tuesday. Oh, I went to shoot a Ring Around the Collar commercial in Venice, Italy, and you saw a 2.5-second mood shot of Venice, and then a gondolier singing, "Of love I sing, tra-la-la-la, for you got ring around the collar." And I went, my powder didn't work.
Of love I sing, la-la-la-la.
More than 30 years later,
Around the collar.
My powder didn't work.
dead on.
Boy, you guys really have drawn up the dregs.
What do you see as the potential in terms of science?
It could be a new chapter. We think we knew a lot, and all of a sudden these people come and display a kind of memory we've never seen before, and we have to say, woo, what is that about? And so we're going to take a look and see if we can figure that out. And it could be very important.
I'm so excited to meet you guys.
One thing Dr. McGaw had not yet done is bring these memory wizards together. So we did, and he kicked off a questioning session unlike any other.
A 7.1 earthquake hit It's the San Francisco, Oakland area.
October
October
17th,
1989.
Tuesday.
What
I remember we were
day
watching the game of the
Tuesday.
World Series.
The World
It
Series.
was
We're all
like,
agreed on
oh
that?
my gosh.
Right.
Are you guys
that was
feeling
terrible.
a little competitive with each other?
No.
Well, I want to make sure that I'm not the dunce here.
No, I know.
I got to keep up.
When they tell you they know, are they always correct?
I would say over 99% of the time, if not 100% of the time. If they tell you something and you can check it, they're right. I've almost given up looking now because, okay, they're right.
People go, okay, what's the trick?
Yeah,
Or what's
exactly, yeah.
that's what you get a lot.
They seem to relish the chance finally to compare notes.
Do you guys ever get ticked at someone and it's something that you consider monumental, and for them it's monumental, and then you bring it up and they go, well, I don't remember that. It's like, how can you forget that?
You know what I love? I love when people get so flattered. Like they go, wow, I must have really made an impression on you. And I go, no, please.
Does it ever freak anybody out?
People misunderstand it a lot of times. They think it's photographic. They think it's autistic. You
Yeah.
know, they call you Rain Man. And I'll just go along with it. I'll say, yeah, definitely Friday, you know, stuff like that.
It was a question we had. Are they autistic?
Are they anything like savants?
Well, I guess the answer is yes and no. They're not people who have an extraordinary ability but can't tie their shoe. And that's part of what I think makes this at least so interesting for me, is that you have this really remarkable ability in a person who is otherwise pretty darn normal.
But what exactly does normal mean when you remember every day of your life? When everything good and everything bad that's ever happened to you is right there, instantly accessible.
When you look back at painful memories, is it just as raw?
Sometimes it'll be as though it happened yesterday. Sometimes it's as though it happened last week.
Just the mention of a sad day, like the one in 1986 when Louise learned she'd have to change schools, and she relives it emotionally.
I felt like my whole world was collapsing. And you say that, and it's like all of a sudden, I feel like this really heartbroken little 13-year-old all over again.
You feel
But
it?
I do feel it.
Vivid?
Yeah.
Awful?
Yeah.
Is your heart?
I mean, my heart is actually pounding right now.
telling me.
this.
She says her memory is a gift, but there are definitely downsides.
Sometimes having this sort of extreme memory can be a very isolating sort of thing. There are times when I feel like I'm fluent in a language that nobody else speaks, or that I'm walking around and everybody else has amnesia.
Are there still skeptics in your field who know what you're up to and just...
Yes, science is based on skepticism. And so, yes, there are skeptics. I suppose if I had not met these people and tested them, I would be a skeptic. My answer to that is, come on over for a day, I'll let you meet a few of them. And I'd like to see how many of them walk away and say, well, it's not a big deal. No, it is a big deal, and we need to figure out what it's all about.
Come on in.
And that work is already underway. Dr. McGaw is doing MRI scans of all the subjects, searching for clues that might be hidden in the structure of their brains.
You all right there? Yeah. Okay, here we go.
Preliminary results from the MRIs are in, and the findings are tantalizing and unexpected. We'll tell you about that and what this kind of memory has meant for their relationships when we come back. Beyond the fun of asking what happened on August 16, 1983, and knowing you'll actually get an answer, there is a lot at stake here. The discovery of people with instant access to virtually every day of their lives could recast our whole understanding of how human memory works and what's possible. And that has implications for all of us. Is it possible we all have memories of every day tucked away in our brains, but we just can't retrieve them? Could understanding these remarkable people someday help with Alzheimer's and other memory disorders? Scientists tell us the potential is enormous, but the inquiry is just beginning. The first step, look at and try to figure out what might be going on inside their brains. We watched as the first MRI images of Louise Owen's brain appeared on the screen. The hope is that somewhere in these pictures and measurements will lie the first clue that might explain what makes her memory so extraordinary.
Did you find anything good?
We'll find out.
What did you think you were going to find, and then what did you find?
Well, if you want the honest truth is that I thought, I bet we'll find nothing.
Oh.
Right. I mean, it's kind of like figuring that, if you open Einstein's brain, there's going to be some huge lobe that says genius. You don't find stuff like that.
But Dr. Cahill was wrong. No flashing genius lobes, but they did find parts of the brain that were significantly larger in people with superior autobiographical memory than in control subjects of matched age and gender.
This would be a person looking this way.
He brought along a model of a brain to show us.
There's two areas that are jumping out at us. The first is this area over here called the temporal lobe, and this area is quite a bit bigger. Now, that's intriguing because this is the chunk of brain neurobiologists think has to do with storing new memories.
So not a surprise.
Not a surprise there.
More interesting, he says, is a second region deep inside the brain called the caudate nucleus, which scientists believe is involved in what's called habit or skill learning, and also in obsessive-compulsive disorder.
Can you give us an analogy of how much larger these sections are?
A lot larger, perhaps up to 7 or 8 what's called standard deviations larger than normal. To understand what that means, if a man was 7 or 8 standard deviations taller than the height of the average man, he'd be 10 feet tall. So we have some potentially whopping effects.
Giants.
Giants.
Now they need to figure out why.
We have the chicken-egg problem. Do they have these larger brain regions because they have exercised it a lot, or do they have good memories because
these are larger?
Because these are larger.
And what about the fact that the caudate nucleus is thought to be involved in obsessive-compulsive disorder? The scientists think there may just be a hint there. And Exhibit A is Mary Lou Henner's closet.
I love organization. I like my shoes a certain way, right foot going this way, left foot going that way, so you can always see the toe and the heel on every pair. And you'll see that things are very color coordinated here, but in sections. And I always hang like with like, and I have the exact same hangers because then everything slides more easily. And
all of them have what we think of as OCD-like behaviors. They love to collect things. They have to have things in just the right order.
What about phobias?
This hypochondria count is like, oh, I hope I don't get this. I hope I don't get that disease.
You have a little
I wash hands frequently, yeah.
So do I. In fact, I dropped my keys when I was in a hurry driving down here, and I went, all right. No, so I went back in and I washed them off. I ran them off. Yeah, I do that all the time if I drop them.
Can you conclude there's a connection, or we're still way too early?
Because it's showing up in one fashion or another in all of them, I'd say it's our biggest clue.
And when you think about it, they even seem to look for ways to organize their memories.
The thing that is most pleasurable is categorizing any event. Any time I went bowling in my life, any wedding.
That you lived.
Starting as a 6-year-old.
Sometimes what I do is I'll go back July 14th, as far back as I can remember. I just go July 14th, 67, that happened. And then maybe I won't remember 68, but I'll remember 69 and 70.
Or you remember around 68.
But do you all do that?
Yeah. Louise even compares dates.
I'll scroll all the way back to 1985. I'll be like, well, which were better, March 3rds or March 4ths? A year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and go all the way back. It's sort of like mental gymnastics.
There's a certain irony to the fact that it is Dr. McGaw who is studying this phenomenon because he is known in the field of memory for discoveries these people seem to defy. His work with rats, like this one, that doesn't know there's a platform hidden below the surface of this water tank, prove the role of adrenaline in making strong memories. The rat swims around the edge, then eventually ventures out and by chance bumps into the platform. The next day, he'll find it just a little bit faster. But watch this rat that learned where the platform was yesterday, then received a shot of adrenaline immediately afterward.
Notice that it starts out not on the edge.
Ooh.
There you go.
Oh, that's impressive.
Adrenaline actually made this rat's brain remember better. And McGaw says the same thing happens in people. When we experience something emotional, positive or negative, our bodies release adrenaline, searing those memories into our brains more strongly.
What can you and I do right now to make sure we remember this conversation? I could kick you.
Yeah, or I could embarrass you. Most of my research is with laboratory rats. And suppose I said all of a sudden, oh, and I'm going to demonstrate it to you, and I drop about 6 rats right at your feet.
I'd remember, believe me, I'd remember.
I said, excuse me, don't sit on her lap. Excuse me, you're not supposed to be there. I think you'd remember that.
Now, the people that we're meeting now,
Yes.
they wouldn't need those rats.
And that's what's so baffling. These people do remember the ordinary, non-emotional events the rest of us routinely forget. Lots of sports fans can remember highlights from particularly exciting games. Bob Petrella, a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, remembers every game.
When was the last time the Redskins beat the Steelers?
Let's see. They played them in 2004, and the Steelers won. They played them in 2000, the Steelers
We sat there as he scanned back through 19 seasons in 19 seconds.
Oh, in 91. Yeah, they played in 91, November 17th, 1991. They killed them.
Bravo.
We tried even further back.
What were the last 2 games in October of 1979?
Let's see, the 22nd, they played Denver on Monday night, and I think they won 42-7.
Yep.
And then they played, Dallas on October 28th, Sunday. It was on CBS, so you can get that game.
Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
We did. We got that game. And 31 years later, he was able to describe plays.
Staubach was scrambling, and Elsie Greenwood just slammed right into him. It was in the fourth quarter.
Staubach really took a shot. He was hit by Greenwood.
He even remembered specific images from the broadcast.
I remember Staubach just sitting on the bench. You could just tell he was out of it.
How about November 11th, 1990?
They didn't play. That was a bye.
You're good. That was a trick question.
No, I remember that day because I was depressed. I had broken up with this woman, and I was going out to run a couple of videos, and I was thinking about her.
There's a quote that I love. It's by the great psychologist William James. He said, if we remembered everything, we should on most occasions be as ill off as if we remembered nothing.
And that's what the field of memory has always considered a given, that a healthy dose of forgetting is crucial to our ability to think.
You abstract and generalize, in part because you forget. When you have a trip to work, and you have the same trip every day, you abstract and you generalize a typical trip to work because you don't remember every single detail of every single trip. So a little forgetting is needed to help you abstract and generalize.
Well, that's what I always thought until I met your 5 subjects today. Do you ever get the feeling that all these memories are cluttering up your mind? But it's just too much up there and I need to sweep this away?
It's organized. You know what I mean? It's organized, so it's called on when you need it. But it's not like they're like, oh, they're coming in all the time. And I don't feel like
It's
that.
not overwhelming.
The surprising thing is that these people don't appear to have cluttered brains. They can pull out the right information at the right time, and that's the puzzle.
It's the real puzzle.
That's the puzzle.
It kind of takes everything we've all assumed, scientists and ordinary people, and said, come on, guys, rethink it.
Yeah, got to do some rethinking, but that's fun. That's part of the fun part of science.
This is where the saliva goes.
And they're pursuing every avenue they can. DNA testing to see if there are differences in their genetic makeup. Handedness testing, since all 3 men are lefties, to see if that yields any clues.
Well, which way would you cartwheel? I mean, could you imagine going this way, or could you imagine?
I'm offering you to do cartwheels.
The inquiry is just getting started, with 6 willing subjects eager to see where it all will lead, and who knows how many more still out there.
I've always loved having this memory. I feel as an actress and as a writer, it's been indispensable. As a mother, as a wife, certainly.
Why do you say that?
Oh my gosh. No, because you can never lose an argument. No, you didn't say that. I said this, you said this.
Yeah, but maybe
It's
he
fun.
doesn't like it so
no,
much.
I know. Yeah, well,
Is
that's
that a
probably why I'm on
problem?
my 3rd. Yeah.
Which raises a real question, since Mary Lou is the only one of the 6 subjects who is married or has children.
You would think that in romance,
It can be tricky.
it can be tricky.
I think so.
Breakups must be
Horrible.
horrible because you cannot not remember.
Right.
I find it intriguing that 4 out of 5 of you are not married, and as far as I'm aware, are not in a relationship. Do you all think there's a problem having this memory and having a good relationship?
I like to think it's coincidence.
You're going to remember everything?
Right.
You're going to win every argument?
Although I think it's, it's what you do with it. I mean, I try not to be defined by this.
And she says, for the most part, she succeeds.
Overall, is it a good thing? Are you glad you have this?
I am.
You are?
I am. I mean, sure, there are times when it's difficult, but I feel like it makes me live my life with so much more intention and so much more joy. Like,
What do you mean more intention?
Because I know that I'm going to remember whatever happens today. It's like, all right, what can I do to make today significant? What can I do that is going to make today stand out?
As you watch these remarkable people, and as you think back on, say, my 3 children, how little I can actually remember from when they were 4, 5, 6, you start to wonder, why are we the default state? Why are we normal? And they're the unusual ones. Why didn't we evolve such that most of us are like them and we're the unusual ones who can hardly remember anything? Just makes you wonder.
How often have you wondered what your spouse is really thinking, or your boss, or the guy sitting across from you on the bus? We all take as a given that we'll never really know for sure. The content of our thoughts is our own, private, secret, unknowable by anyone else, until now, that is. Neuroscience research into how we think and what we're thinking is advancing at a stunning rate, making it possible for the first time in human history to peer directly into the brain to read out the physical makeup of our thoughts. Some would say, to read our minds.
This is the technology that is transforming what once was science fiction into just plain science. It's a specialized use of MRI scanning called functional MRI, fMRI for short, that makes it possible to see what's going on inside the brain while people are thinking.
Every time I walk into that scanner room and I see the person's brain appear on the screen, when I see those patterns, it is just incredible, unthinkable.
Mind reading, what do you call it?
Thought identification.
Whatever you want to call it, what neuroscientist Marcel Just and his colleague Tom Mitchell at Carnegie Mellon University have done is combine fMRI's ability to look at the brain in action with computer science's new power to sort through massive amounts of data. The goal? To see if they could identify exactly what happens in the brain when people think specific thoughts.
Okay, are you ready to get started?
They did an experiment where they asked subjects to think about 10 objects, 5 of them tools like screwdriver and hammer, and 5 of them dwellings like igloo and castle, then recorded and analyzed the activity in their brains for each. You had them think about a screwdriver, and the computer found the place in the brain where that person was thinking screwdriver?
Screwdriver isn't one place in the brain, it's many places in the brain. When you think of a screwdriver, you think about how you hold it, how you twist it, what it looks like, what you use it for.
And each of those functions are in different places?
Correct.
Just says when we think screwdriver, or igloo for example, neurons start firing at varying levels of intensity in different areas throughout the brain.
And we found that we could identify which object they were thinking about from their brain activation patterns.
You're reading their mind.
We're identifying the thought that's occurring. It's
Whoa.
incredible, just incredible.
Are you saying that if you think of a hammer, that your brain is identical to my brain when I think of a hammer?
Not identical. We have idiosyncrasies. Maybe I've had a bad experience with a hammer and you haven't, but it's close enough to identify each other's thoughts. So, that was never known before.
We asked if his team was up for a challenge. Would they take our associate producer, Megan Frank, whose brain had never been scanned before, and see if the computer could identify her thoughts? Just and Mitchell agreed to give it a try and see if they could do it in almost real time. So you've never done an instant analysis, as we might say on television?
Nobody's done this ever.
That's actually her brain?
That's her brain.
Inside the scanner, Megan was shown a series of 10 items and asked to think for a few seconds about each one. If it all comes out right, when she's thinking hammer, the computer will know she's thinking hammer.
Right. Okay, we're all done.
So Megan,
Yes. How was it?
It wasn't bad.
Good.
Within minutes, the computer, unaware of what pictures Megan had been shown, and working only from her brain activity patterns as read out by the scanner, was ready to tell us, in its own voice, what it believed was the first object Megan had been thinking about.
I think the word is knife.
All right, one.
Right.
Bingo. All right.
Then the second.
I think the word is hammer.
All right.
I think the word is window.
It's perfect, right?
So far.
And it continued to be, word after word.
Apartment.
10 out of 10.
10 out of 10. Well done, well done.
Good thinking.
And of course, this is just the beginning.
Exactly.
Who knows what you're going to be able to read? It's
That's
a little
right.
scary, actually.
Well, that's our research program for the next 5 years.
What?
To see how, we're not satisfied with hammer.
And neither a neuroscientist 4,000 miles away in Berlin at the Bernstein Center. John Dylan Haynes is hard at work here, using the scanner not just to identify objects people are thinking about, but to read their intentions.
So we're going to start now with the actual experiment.
Subjects were asked to make a simple decision, whether to add or subtract two numbers they would be shown later on. Haynes found he could read directly from the activity in this small part of the brain that controls intentions what they had decided to do.
This is a kind of blown up version of the brain activity happening here. And you can see that if a person is planning to add or to subtract, the pattern of brain activity is different in these two cases.
I always tell my students that there is no science fiction anymore. All the science fiction I read in high school, we're doing.
To Paul Root Wolpe, director of the Center for Ethics at Emory University in Atlanta, the ability to read our thoughts and intentions this way is revolutionary.
Throughout history, we could never actually coerce someone to reveal information. Torture doesn't work that well. Persuasion doesn't work that well. The right to keep one's thoughts locked up in their brain is amongst the most fundamental rights of being human.
You're saying that if someone can read my intentions, we have to talk about who might in the future be able to do that.
Absolutely. Whether we're going to let the state do it or whether we're going to let me do it. I have 2 teenage daughters. I come home one day and my car is dented, and both of them say they didn't do it. Am I going to be allowed to drag them off to the local brain imaging lie detection company and get them put in a scanner? We don't know.
But before we've even started the debate, there are 2 companies already offering lie detection services using brain scans. One with the catchy name No Lie MRI. But our experts caution that the technique is still unproven. In the meantime, Haynes is working on something he thinks may be even more effective, reading out from your brain exactly where you've been. Haynes showed me an experiment he created out of a video game.
And you can actually navigate around if you want.
He had me navigate through a series of rooms in different virtual reality houses.
Now I would put you in a scanner and I would show you some of these scenes that you've seen and some scenes that you haven't seen.
Well, haven't seen anything yet. Oh, okay.
And,
okay, now I'm getting
do you
into familiar
recognize something?
Yeah, I recognize the bar.
And right at this moment, we would be able to tell from your brain activity that you've already seen this environment before.
And so this is a potential tool for
It's a
police.
potential tool, absolutely.
In the case of break-ins.
You might be able to tell if someone's been in an Al-Qaeda training camp before.
Have any national security agencies been in touch with you?
Not in the US.
Anywhere in the world?
Yes, in Germany, but...
So there are people who are considering these kinds of possibilities.
And using them. In India last summer, a woman was convicted of murder after an EEG of her brain allegedly revealed that she was familiar with the circumstances surrounding the poisoning of her ex-fiancé.
Can you, through our legal system, be forced to take one of these tests?
It's a great question, and the legal system hasn't decided on this yet.
But we do have a Fifth Amendment. We don't have to incriminate ourselves.
Well, here's where it gets very interesting, because the Fifth Amendment only prevents the courts from forcing us to testify against ourselves. but you can force me to give DNA or a hair sample or blood, even if that would incriminate me. So here's the million-dollar question. If you can brain image me and get information directly from my brain, is that testimony, or is that like DNA, blood, semen, and other things that you could take from me?
Court case, inevitable.
There will be a Supreme Court case about this.
There you go. For now, it's impossible to force someone to have his or her brain scanned because the subject has to lie still and cooperate. But that could change.
There are some other technologies that are being developed that may be able to be used covertly and even remotely. So, for example, they're trying to develop now a beam of light that would be projected onto your forehead. It would go a couple of millimeters into your frontal cortex, and then receptors would get the reflection of that light. And there's some studies that suggest that we could use that as a lie detection device.
And we wouldn't know we've got a red dot in our forehead?
No, you wouldn't. If you were sitting there in the airport and being questioned, they could beam that on your forehead without your knowledge. We can't do that yet, but they're working on it.
Scary as that is, imagine a world where companies could read our minds too. Light beams may be a bit far off, but fMRI scanning is already being used to try to figure out what we want to buy and how to sell it to us. It's a new field called neuromarketing. One of its pioneers is neuroscientist Gemma Calvert, co-founder of a London company called Neuroscience.
Do you have a lot of clients?
Yes, such as Unilever, Intel, McDonald's, Procter & Gamble, MTV or Viacom.
And she says it's a growing field.
What we've seen is a sort of snowballing effect over the last few years. I think there are about 92 neuromarketing agencies worldwide.
But some experts question whether it's ethical to scan the brain for commercial purposes and say neuromarketers may be promising more than they can really deliver.
If you image my brain and you say, aha, Paul craves chocolate chip cookies, and I say, no, I don't. Now, are you going to believe the brain over me? You can only do that if you have proven that that part of the brain lighting up means in all cases that that person desires chocolate chip cookies. And what a lot of people are doing is they're just imaging the brain, then they're declaring what that means, and they're never proving that it actually translates into behavior.
You know, it's very interesting. When you show someone a brain scan, people just believe it. It just reeks of credibility.
Absolutely,
And
absolutely.
And you telling me that's the area where people add and subtract, I thought, well, of course, he knows.
But I could have told you anything.
I know. So as brain imaging continues to advance and find its way into the courts, the market, and who knows what other aspects of our lives, one message is be cautious. Another is get ready. Back at Carnegie Mellon, Just and Mitchell have already uncovered the signatures in our brains for kindness, hypocrisy, and love.
It's breathtaking.
Yes.
And kind of eerie.
Well, you know, I think the reason people have that reaction is it because it reveals the essence of what it means to be a person. All of those kinds of things that define us as human beings are brain patterns.
We don't want to know that.
Well,
that it all boils down to, I don't know, molecules and things like that.
But we are, you know, we are biological creatures. You know, our limbs we accept are, you know, muscles and bone. And our brain is a biological thinking machine.
Do you think one day, who knows how far into the future, there'll be a machine that'll be able to read very complex thought, like, I hate so-and-so, or, you know, I love the ballet because.
Definitely, definitely. And not in 20 years. I think in 3-5 years. Ample does.
3 years?
Well, 5.
Who among us hasn't wished we could read someone else's mind, know exactly what they're thinking? Well, that's impossible, of course, since our thoughts are, more than anything else, our own. Private, personal, unreachable. Or at least that's what we've always, well, thought. Advances in neuroscience have shown that on a physical level, our thoughts are actually a vast network of neurons firing all across our brains. So if that brain activity could be identified and analyzed, could our thoughts be decoded? Could our minds be read? Well, a team of scientists at Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh has spent more than a decade trying to do just that. We started our reporting on their work 10 years ago, and what they've discovered since has drawn us back. In Carnegie Mellon's scanner room, 2 floors underground,
Have a seat.
a steady stream of research subjects come to have their brains and thoughts read in this MRI machine. It's a type of scanning called functional MRI, fMRI.
All right, we'll cue it up and then we'll start.
That looks at what's happening inside the brain as a person thinks.
It's like being an astronomer when the first telescope is discovered, or being a biologist when the first microscope is developed.
Neuroscientist Marcel Just says this technology has made it possible for the first time to see the physical makeup of our thoughts.
Okay, are you ready to get started?
When we first visited Dr. Just's lab 10 years ago, he and his team had conducted a study. They put people in the scanner and asked them to think about 10 objects, 5 of them tools, like screwdriver and hammer, and 5 of them dwellings, like igloo and castle, while measuring activity levels throughout their brains. The idea was to crunch the data and try to identify distinctive patterns of activity for each object.
You had them think about a screwdriver, and the computer found the place in the brain where that person was thinking screwdriver?
Screwdriver isn't one place in the brain, it's many places in the brain. When you think of a screwdriver, you think about how you hold it, how you twist it, what it looks like.
And each of those functions are in different places?
Correct.
He showed us that by dividing the brain into thousands of tiny cubes and analyzing the amount of activity in each one, his team was able to identify unique patterns for each object.
You're reading their mind.
We're identifying the thought that's occurring. It's
Whoa.
incredible, just incredible.
Incredible, but only the beginning. In the decades since, Professor Just's lab has taken this technique and applied it far beyond hammers and igloos to increasingly complex thoughts. This is basic science, knowledge for knowledge's sake, not trying to cure disease, but to understand the fundamental workings of our bodies, and in this case, of our minds. One of Dr. Just's main questions was whether he could find patterns for abstract ideas. So he did a study asking people to think about forgiveness, gossip, spirituality. Could they be identifiable in the brain the way the screwdriver was? Remarkably, the answer was yes. This was the activation pattern when people thought about spirituality. And this was gossip.
One of my favorite subjects.
And you see a slightly different pattern.
One difference between the two was in areas of the brain scientists had already shown become active when we think about other people, circled in blue. Those areas lit up bright red when subjects thought about gossip, not so much for spirituality. In another study, Dr. Just tested whether patterns are the same when people think in different languages. They are. And he's asked acting students to conjure up emotions in the scanner to see if feelings have distinctive activation patterns too.
And what did you find?
Each emotion had its own characteristic values, and you could tell which one was which.
And it's the same in every head.
Amazingly, it was common across people.
Common across people? Does that mean we could put our colleague, associate producer Jamie Woods, into a scanner for the first time, and Dr. Just's team would be able to identify her emotions?
So she's seeing words.
For 9 seconds each, Jamie's job was to think of little scenarios that would conjure up the feelings on the screen. After she came out,
welcome back.
Thank you.
A computer program took the brain activation data gathered by the scanner and tried to decode her thoughts.
So what were you thinking about for disgust?
I was thinking of someone throwing up on me at like a baseball game. And
So could the computer read her brain patterns and tell what she'd been feeling?
The program's answer is, I think the emotion is disgust. The experienced emotion was actually disgust. That was correct.
Awesome.
Next.
I think the emotion is envy.
What were you thinking for envy?
I was just thinking of beautiful models.
The computer program got all of Jamie's emotions right.
It's reading what Jamie's feeling.
And it's funny, isn't it? Because it's so personal. We all think of our own thoughts as so individual, so intimate. How could anybody else's thoughts be like mine? And they are.
It's feelings, too.
Yes, feelings. Now, obviously, people think very different thoughts. But it's, like people choose to do different things with their bodies, but they all walk putting one foot in front of the other. Nobody walks sideways. Nobody walks backwards systematically. There's something about the biological apparatus that makes you act in a certain way with your body. And I don't think we realize the degree to which the biological apparatus that we have in our skulls governs, shapes the way we think.
Professor Just's goal is to one day create a dictionary of brain activation, a key to what all different thoughts look like inside our minds. But he also started wondering whether those definitions might be different in people with disorders like autism.
Okay, you're going to swing your legs up at this end.
Prior research had found structural differences in the brains of people with autism. So the question was whether thought patterns might differ too.
Hi, Jeff. This is Rob. How are you doing?
Dr. Just's team recruited 17 adults with autism and asked them, as well as 17 control subjects, to think about social interactions like adore, hug, humiliate, challenging terrain for many with autism. The results were striking. The activation patterns differed enough to tell who had autism and who didn't with 97% accuracy.
The people with autism thought of these social interactions apart from themselves.
As he showed us in these findings for the word hug, the key differences were in brain regions that activate when we think about ourselves, circled in blue.
Right there.
There and there, those areas light up much more among the controls.
Whereas the autism subjects showed far less activation.
They thought of it more like a definition of hug without self-involvement.
And that you saw it with word after word.
Yes.
I just thought, wow, this is the coolest thing I've heard in I don't know how long.
David Brent is a psychiatrist at the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center, where he runs a clinic for suicidal adolescents. He happened to attend a talk Marcel Just was giving about his autism findings and immediately wondered about his own patients.
So I went up to him afterwards and I said, would you be interested in talking about maybe doing a study on suicide?
You hear about cases of suicide where the person had been depressed, but you also hear of situations where people say, there was nothing wrong.
Suicide is a great mystery because the person who knows the most about why it happened isn't there to talk with. You try to reconstruct what happened, but nobody has a window into people's, interior thoughts.
Nobody, that is, except someone with a mind-reading device. Doctors Just and Brent began planning a pilot study to see if the scanner might reveal what is altered in the thoughts of people contemplating suicide. They reached out to Matt Nock, a Harvard professor, who has studied how difficult it is for doctors and emergency rooms to know which patients are safe to send home.
Is this the first time anybody's looked inside the brain to see about suicidal thoughts?
Yes. This is the first study I've ever heard of where someone's looked in the brain of someone who's suicidal, who's actively thinking about death or suicide.
You don't see life as something that's going to be fixed. The only way to get out of it is to kill yourself.
Dan Tosky, a former patient at Dr. Brent's clinic, volunteered to participate in the study to help scientists better understand suicidal thinking. Do you think in terms of the word pain?
Pain is when you break a limb or you have a migraine and it hurts so bad that you can't see. This, being depressed and suicidal, it's much greater.
Much greater.
Much greater than pain.
To be in the study, subjects had to have had suicidal thoughts within the prior month. They and control subjects were asked to think about words like funeral and death, as well as positive words, including praise, good, and carefree. In both categories, the suicidal group differed from controls.
This is the group that's thinking about suicide.
As with the autism study, the key differences turned out to be in those self-related areas. They lit up bright red among suicidal subjects when they thought about death-related words.
I give you the word funeral. You know, what do you think about? Maybe your grandmother's funeral or something like that.
Exactly.
A suicidal person is much more likely to say my funeral.
For positive words, the findings were exactly the opposite. When the non-suicidal controls thought about the word carefree, they thought about something that involved themselves. Suicidal subjects significantly less so.
Did you ever imagine that you could ask people to think about the word carefree and you'd be able to tell if someone was having suicidal thoughts?
No, you know,
it's a breakthrough idea.
It's a lot of fun if you're a basic scientist to discover how things work, but there's an extra level of gratification when you learn that it's possibly helpful and useful.
This work is still in its infancy. Doctors Just, Brent, and Knock are doing a larger NIH-funded study to collect more data. And while for now it's too costly and cumbersome to put people into MRI scanners to see if it's safe to release them from the hospital,
if they could come up with an easier way to do this.
Absolutely. Just like the first GPS was, a big computer in a big room, and now it's in all of our phones. If there's a way to, a few steps down the road, make much more compact this approach and bring it into emergency rooms and outpatient clinics, it could go a huge way towards moving forward clinical care.
But as this technology advances toward fulfilling its full promise, it's hard not to also wonder about its peril.
Will it ever be possible to read someone's thoughts precisely?
The thoughts are there precisely if you could just get close enough to the electrical activity.
You think one day we'll figure out how to do that?
Yes.
Which means that we'll never be able to have our thoughts completely secure within ourselves.
I think it will be technologically possible to invade people's thoughts. But it's our societal obligation to make sure that never happens.
Our lives are filled with distractions. Email, Twitter, texting. We're constantly connected to technology, rarely alone with just our thoughts. Which is probably why there's a growing movement in America to train people to get around the stresses of daily life. It's a practice called mindfulness, and it basically means being aware of your thoughts, physical sensations, and surroundings. Tonight, we'll introduce you to the man who's largely responsible for mindfulness gaining traction. His name is Jon Kabat-Zinn, and he thinks mindfulness is the answer for people who are so overwhelmed by life, they feel they aren't really living at all.
There are a lot of different ways to talk about mindfulness, but what it really means is awareness.
Is it being present?
It is being present. That's exactly what it is.
I don't feel I'm very present in each moment. I feel like every moment I'm either thinking about something that's coming down the road or something that's been in the past.
So ultimately, all this preparing is for what? For the next moment, like the last moment, and then we're dead. So in a certain way, are we going to experience while we're still alive? We're only alive now.
Jon Kabat-Zinn is an MIT-trained scientist who's been practicing mindfulness for 47 years. Back in 1979, he started teaching mindfulness through meditation to people suffering from chronic pain and illness. That program is now used in more than 700 hospitals worldwide. So how can you be mindful in your daily life?
When your alarm goes off and you jump out of bed. what is the nature of the mind in that moment? Are you already like, oh my God, your calendar pops into your mind and you're driven already? Or can you take a moment and just lie in bed and just feel your body breathing and remember, oh yeah, brand new day and I'm still alive. So I get out of bed with awareness, brush my teeth with awareness. When you're in the shower, next time check and see if you're in the shower.
What do you mean check and see if you're in the shower?
Well, you may not be. You may be in your first meeting at work. You may have 50 people in the shower with you.
Kabat-Zinn says mindfulness takes practice. A lot of people start with a training class to learn how to meditate. He agreed to teach us at a weekend retreat on a remote mountaintop in Northern California. When we arrived, we were told there'd be no television to watch, no internet, not even an alarm clock.
So I'm checking in.
The retreat was full of professionals, neuroscientists, business leaders, Silicon Valley executives. Before we began, we all had to surrender our last ties to the outside world.
Put your devices in the basket, you know. I'm contributing my MacBook Air and my iPhone, happily.
I wasn't exactly happy to give up my phone. I usually check emails several times an hour.
So let's take a few minutes and just settle into an erect and dignified posture.
The retreat lasted 3 days, and most of that time was spent just sitting there, silently meditating, with occasional guidance from Kabat-Zinn.
There's no place to go. There's nothing to do. We're just asking you to sit and know that you're sitting.
Knowing that you're sitting may sound simple. Turns out it's not. The mind constantly wanders.
The mind has a life of its own. It goes here and there.
To not get lost in thought, Kabat-Zinn recommended focusing on the sensation of breathing in and out.
Can we actually ride with full awareness on the waves of the breath at the belly, at the nostrils, in the chest, and then simply rest here in awareness?
Resting in awareness is one of those phrases used a lot by people who practice mindfulness. But when I tried to do it, it wasn't restful, and I worried I wasn't doing it right. I kept thinking about work. I miss my cell phone.
You're not alone.
Having a little withdrawal, I will say. Kabat-Zinn, who's written 10 books on mindfulness and led nearly 100 retreats, describes meditation as a mental workout.
The mind wanders away from the breath, and then you gently and non-judgmentally just bring it back.
So it's okay that the mind drifts away, but you just bring it back.
It's the nature of the mind to drift away. The mind is like the Pacific Ocean. It waves. And mindfulness has been shown to drop underneath the waves. If you drop underneath the agitation in the mind into your breath, deep enough, calmness, gentle undulations.
After hours of meditating and 30-minute sessions, it does get easier. Those waves of thought Kabat-Zinn described, they're still there, but you get less distracted by them. At breakfast, we spent time relearning some of the very basic things in life, including how to eat food. Eating a meal in complete silence is a little awkward, but without conversation as a distraction, you taste more and eat less. This is something called walking meditation. The goal is to learn to be aware of each and every movement and feeling. I know it seems ridiculous, but it does change the way you experience walking.
The Zen people from ancient China, when you're walking, just walk. Turns out to be the hardest thing.
That's
when
an
you're
ancient
walking,
saying.
just walk. When you're eating, just eat. Not from the TV, not with the newspaper. Turns out that's huge.
Congressman Tim Ryan, an Ohio Democrat, says mindfulness might look a lot like nothing, but he really believes it can change America for the better. He attended his first meditation retreat in 2008, just days after winning a grueling re-election campaign. But being mindful at a retreat is one thing. We wondered if back in Washington, Congressman Ryan ever worries about how all this looks.
Well, you know, I can see myself in high school going, whoa, stay away from those guys.
So how do you use it here on Capitol Hill?
I'm on the budget committee, for example. There's a lot of conflict, and people say things that get you ramped up. I find myself, as my body clenches up when somebody says something that I know is wrong, or I want to catch them in a lie or whatever, that Just calm down when it's your turn. You make your point. Hey, man.
You don't hear the words calm and Congress together very often, but Ryan is trying to change that. He hosts weekly meditation sessions open to members and staff of both parties.
Now shifting the attention to take in the entire body.
Have you gotten any Republican congressmen in to meditate with you yet?
No. We're working on it.
He's written a book about mindfulness and obtained $1 million of federal funding to teach it to school children in his Ohio district.
I feel like we're calm right now.
Yes, you are. I've seen it transform classrooms. I've seen it heal veterans. I've seen what it does to individuals who have really high chronic levels of stress and how it has helped their body heal itself. I wouldn't be willing to stick my neck out this far if I didn't think this is the thing that can really help shift the country.
To some people, though, this may sound like kind of new age gobbledygook.
There's so many different compelling studies that are showing that this is not New Age gobbledygook. This is potentially transformative of our health and well-being psychologically as well as physically. It can be useful for anxiety, depression, stress reduction.
There have been a number of studies that show mindfulness can lead to those benefits, as well as improvements in memory and attention. And at the University of Massachusetts, Judson Brewer, a psychiatrist and neuroscientist, uses mindfulness to treat addiction.
This is just the next generation of exercise. We've got the physical, exercise components down, and now it's about working out how can we actually train our minds.
Dr. Brewer is trying to understand how mindfulness can alter the functioning of the brain. He uses a cap lined with 128 electrodes.
We're going to start filling each of these 128 wells with conduction gel.
The electrodes are able to pick up signals from the posterior cingulate, part of a brain network linked to memory and emotion.
This is all just picking up electrical signal from the top of your head.
Since attending the mindfulness retreat, I'd been meditating daily and was curious to see if it had an impact on my brain.
We're going to have you start with thinking of something that was very anxiety-provoking for you.
Okay. When I thought about something stressful, the cells in my brain's posterior cingulate immediately started firing, shown by the red lines that went off the chart on the computer screen.
Just drop into meditation.
Okay. When I let go of those stressful thoughts and refocused on my breath, within seconds the brain cells that had been firing quieted down, shown by the blue lines on the computer.
That's really fascinating to see like that.
Dr. Brewer believes everyone can train their brains to reach that blue mindfulness zone, but he says all the technology we're surrounded by makes it difficult.
If you look at people out on the street, if you look at people at restaurants, nobody's having conversations anymore. They're sitting at dinner looking at their phone because their brain is so addicted to it.
You really think there's something in the brain that's addicted to that?
Well, it's the same reward pathways as addiction, absolutely.
I'm, on mobile devices all day long, and I feel like I could go through an entire day and not be present.
And what's that like?
It's exhausting.
Yeah. So all of this is leading to a societal exhaustion.
The irony is many of the people responsible for creating the gadgets that distract us are themselves practicing mindfulness. More than 2,000 people from companies like Google, Facebook, and Instagram showed up earlier this year in San Francisco for a mindfulness conference called Wisdom 2.0.
Please welcome our guests.
Karen May is a Google vice president, and that's Chade Main-Tun, a former engineer who's become kind of a mindfulness guru. As could only happen at a place like Google, his actual title is Jolly Good Fellow.
Which nobody can deny.
So what does a Jolly Good Fellow do?
My job description is to enlighten minds, open hearts, and create world peace.
That's your job description?
That's my job description.
I've heard that at some meetings at Google, you actually start out with moments of silence.
We do.
How long do you sit there quietly for?
It's literally a minute or two of noticing your breathing, calming yourself down, being present, and then you're able to go into the meeting, the business at hand, with a little bit more focus.
Does it make people more productive?
Yes, it does. When the mind is unagitated, when the mind is calm, that mind is most conducive to creative problem solving.
To innovate.
Correct. And one of the powers of mindfulness is the ability to get to that frame of mind on demand.
So, along with their free health clubs and other company perks, Google now offers their 52,000 employees free lessons in mindfulness.
In the middle of stress, when everything's falling apart, you can take one breath.
You know, I can imagine some people rolling their eyes and saying, oh, come on, of course, Google, you guys have tons of money, and there's massage therapists walking around and all sorts of nice things for employees, but it just doesn't seem practical.
The advantage of this is it actually doesn't cost anything and it doesn't take much time.
And you believe it really works?
I absolutely believe it works.
After nearly 4 decades of teaching mindfulness, John Kabat-Zinn is happy to see it hitting the mainstream. But if you're starting to think mindfulness is something you should start practicing, he says you may be missing the point.
It's not a big should. It's not like, oh, I got to now one more thing that I have to put in my life. Now I have to be mindful, you know.
And if it becomes that one more thing they got to do after they take the yoga class.
Just don't do it. Don't do it. It's not a doing at all, in fact. It's a being, and being doesn't take any time.